Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of a partnership with Alaska Public Media. And it is Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go to weather.gov/Alaska. And looking at the headlines, well, blizzard warnings continue along the eastern portion of the North Slope, the northeast Arctic coast around AKwx, and then we have dense fog advisories for tonight through noon Wednesday for much of the Panhandle. That region got a lot of rain here since late last week. Some areas picking up as much as 5 to 8 inches of rainfall. Juneau setting a daily record of nearly 3.5 inches on Friday the 21st, and a two-day total of Friday and Saturday of over 6.5 inches of rain. We are now at last quarter moon, and the new moon will occur on February 1st. And if we get any clear skies, it'd be a good time to take a look for the aurora if we have any solar activity that would enhance the northern lights. But overall, coming up here as we close out the tail end of January into the very beginning of February, it is not going to be as warm or quite as snowy and wet. In other words, not the really heavy precipitation that we've seen here over the past week or so as we go into the very beginning of February. Looking at the current advisories and warnings, we still have that blizzard warning there along the Arctic coast in the vicinity of AKwx, and then westward winter weather advisory in effect there overnight till 6 a.m. for areas Prudhoe Bay westward for UAFTV all the way down to Point Hope. And then that's just mainly for blowing snow there. But nevertheless, they have had some winds there in the eastern North Slope, gusting as high as 65 miles an hour, creating those blizzard conditions. And they are expected to continue there through at least Wednesday morning. Looking along the Panhandle, widespread dense fog advisories have been issued for this evening through noon Wednesday. It does not include Skagway or Haines, but nevertheless, areas that did get the heavier rainfall, we do expect widespread areas of dense fog to form as we go through tonight and especially into the early hours of Wednesday morning. Wanted to show you a really interesting image taken from NASA's International Space Station of volcanic clouds as the result of the Tonga volcanic eruption that happened on January 15th. This is an image taken by astronauts aboard the International Space Station a day later, and you can see these kind of bluish and reddish clouds that are very high up in the atmosphere, up in the stratosphere. We had volcanic ash get all the way up into the stratosphere, some 24 miles above the Earth's surface. It's also causing to see enhanced orange and red sunsets. That's something we may watch for as these fine particles circulate in the stratosphere as we go through spring and early summer. You may notice an enhancement to the sunrises and sunsets. Another piece of information, the James Webb Space Telescope that was launched on December 25th, Christmas Day, has now reached its point 1 million miles away at the Lagrangian point that allows it to have an orbit that we need it for it to be useful to us around the sun. It is fully deployed. They will continue to fine-tune the mirror adjustments so that they can get spectacular images. We are hoping here by summertime, I would imagine in June or July, we may be able to see some of the first images coming from this really remarkable space telescope. So stay tuned. In the meantime, though, satellite imagery closer to Earth. The geosynchronous weather satellites are around 23,000 miles above the equator, and they are showing us that we do have another system coming up out of the North Pacific into the southwestern Gulf as we go through midweek. There's also a couple other areas of low pressure south and southwest of the central and western Aleutians, and then up to the north we do see some cloudiness there in portions of the interior, but especially up there along the Arctic coast into northwest Canada. That is the system right now creating those stronger winds along the Arctic coast and the blizzard conditions. But otherwise, the main weather story will be the low pressure coming up from the North Pacific into the Gulf. It's not going to be as strong as a couple of the more recent ones we had here, especially this past weekend and late last week. Nevertheless, it's going to bring some more snow and rain to areas of the Gulf Coast, especially from the east side of Kodiak Island through the Seward Peninsula, Prince William Sound, eastward into the Panhandle as we go through Wednesday and finally into Friday. Across the interior and north, we'll see a ridge of high pressure take shape from eastern Russia across northern parts of the state into far northwest Canada, the Canadian Arctic coast. Right now, though, this afternoon, we do have a stronger pressure gradient there along the Arctic coast, responsible for those stronger winds creating the blizzard conditions. And overnight into early Wednesday morning, high pressure being situated there from far eastern Russia along the Bering Strait, and then also along the Alcan border to just inland there from the Panhandle. And that's also going to help create conditions favorable for that widespread areas of dense fog there across much of the Panhandle tonight through noon on Wednesday. And then low pressure will begin lifting up out of the North Pacific into the southwestern Gulf later Wednesday afternoon and evening, spreading more snow, a mix of precipitation as well as some rain. Meanwhile, pretty strong low is also going to be located southwest of the western half of the Aleutians. A couple of occluded fronts working their way up through the Aleutians will keep some rain and mixed showers going. Meanwhile, by Thursday, we'll see high pressure entrenched from eastern Russia across northern parts of the state into the Canadian Arctic coast, while the low continues to sit and spin there in the southwestern Gulf, creating areas of snow and rain along the Gulf Coast, including the Panhandle. The Panhandle will get more into that precipitation, especially latter half of Thursday into Friday. So lows tonight will generally be near a bit below freezing at the Panhandle with some fog, freezing fog, and then areas across the inner portions of South Central will get down in the single digits, so we are going to definitely be colder than the 40s and even some 50-degree readings. East side, I should say, north of Anchorage there, around Eagle River, Wasilla, Palmer had temperatures in the 40s, lower 50s due to Chinook winds this weekend coming down slope off of the Chugach Mountains. Temperatures could get back up lower 40s along the outer coast of the Panhandle, generally 20s for the south central interior, teens as you go further inland through the Copper River, Talkeetna area. And Thursday morning lows similar, and then with Thursday afternoon highs, lower 40s there through the Panhandle, at least the outer channels and coast areas. And then up through Anchorage and Valdez, we'll see highs in the 20s. Coldest temperatures in the state will be across the western areas, northwest from the Seward Peninsula on up through the western half of the Brooks Range, 20s to near 30 below. And then daytime highs remaining below zero north of the Yukon River. Concentrated coldest readings northwest quadrant of the state for Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning we'll see lows 20s and 30s below, so some expansion of the cold up that way, especially along and north of the Yukon River. High temperatures in most areas across central northern Alaska will be below zero, though not as cold as what we've seen in recent episodes and going back to the holidays and especially December. Looking at Wednesday morning lows, some sub-zero readings there through the lower Yukon and going up the Kuskokwim River Basin. Temperatures near freezing out along the Aleutians. Wednesday afternoon highs single digits for the southwest interior. Generally around freezing or a bit higher as you get out through the tip of the Alaska Peninsula and extending out through the eastern central Aleutians. And Thursday morning we'll see lows a bit colder there through the lower Yukon, mid-upper Kuskokwim River Basin. There's some 10 to maybe near 20 below. And temperatures will be down near freezing around Dutch Harbor and generally a bit above freezing as you get out toward Adak and Atka. Thursday afternoon highs still remaining near or below zero across much of the southwest interior as we anticipate temperatures to return closer to normal. And a quick check of the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. Yes, we expect very end of January into February, early February temperatures near to a bit below normal, mainly in the northern parts of the state. And precipitation is expected to average a bit above normal on the west of the Alaska Range across portions of the southwest, with below normal precipitation for a change to start February there across the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time now for your aviation weather, and if you have a flight planned this midweek, Wednesday into Thursday, the main weather features will be high pressure from eastern Russia across northern parts of Alaska into northwest Canada, particularly just south of the Canadian Arctic coast. And we'll be watching an area of low pressure lifting out of the North Pacific up into the southwestern Gulf. It'll bring another round of some moisture to areas of the Gulf Coast, though not as heavy as the storms that we saw here late last week and over the weekend. IFR conditions will extend north and west of the Alaska Range on Wednesday morning, as well as over portions of the northern and especially central and southeastern part of the Panhandle. For Wednesday afternoon, though, areas of IFR decrease across the interior. A few pockets there, Copper River Basin, maybe around Whittier, west-southwest side of Prince William Sound, and up toward Chilkoot and White Passes, and then out over the Gulf. For Thursday morning, though, low will begin to lift northward from out of the North Pacific into the southwest Gulf, so that's going to spread moisture northward. We'll see some IFR conditions along the southeast Alcan border through the Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound, up into much of the Kenai, and especially Kodiak Island in the west side of the Gulf. And then for Thursday afternoon, that moisture continues to spread north and eastward, so IFR conditions will be more widespread from the 40-mile Gold Country, especially central eastern Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, down through the Kenai, across the northern Gulf Coast, on over into the at least northern half of the Panhandle, of which we expect the Panhandle to become all IFR as we go into Thursday evening and Thursday night. Pass conditions, Anaktuvuk Pass should hold on to MVFR conditions on Wednesday, as will Adigan Pass. Further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill should generally be VFR throughout the day, as will Rainy Pass. And as we round the central and eastern portion of the Alaska Range, we do expect VFR conditions at Windy Pass, but more in the way of MVFR conditions around Isabel and as well as Mentasta passes. To the south and west, Tanita will see VFR conditions hold, but in the vicinity of Portage Pass, generally MVFR conditions through the pass. Along the west end, VFR conditions will become MVFR, and along the east entrance, look for MVFR conditions in the morning becoming IFR as that moisture increases up from the south. And then Chilkoot and White will generally hold on to IFR conditions during the day on Wednesday there across the northern, far northern end of the Panhandle. Freezing levels do bump up a bit ahead of that low across the Panhandle, upwards to 2,000 feet into the central Panhandle, to as high as 6,000 feet there as you get around Craig and just toward Haida Gwaii. And then the surface freezing line runs along the Panhandle coast out to just off of Kodiak Island, to crossing there between the eastern Aleutians and the tip of the Alaska Peninsula into the central Bering. The greatest chance of considerable moderate icing will be in association with that increasing moisture coming up out of the North Pacific into the southwestern Gulf, just off of south and east of Kodiak Island between 3,000 and 12,000 feet. Elsewhere, just a few pockets of isolated moderate icing possible up through the lower Yukon Valley, southeast portion of the state into the northern Panhandle, and then out over the western Aleutians between 2,000 and 8,000 feet. And looking at jet stream level winds, they are strongest across southern Alaska into northwest Canada, upward to 125 knot jet from the west. And then on the backside of that, we have winds out of the west, northwest there, at least eastern Russia to 95 knots, dropping down to mid-levels at 9,000 feet. We see the hints of that mid-level circulation of low pressure south of Kodiak Island in the North Pacific, with southerly flow ahead of it. Backside of it, northeasterly flow 40 knots over the Alaska Peninsula, and 60 knot flow out of the southeast there over the western Aleutians. And as it translates down to 3,000 feet, that low pressure circulation showing up well in the North Pacific south of Kodiak Island, with northeasterly winds upwards of 45 to 50 knots there along the Alaska Peninsula, and stronger winds as high as 50 to 70 knots throughout the western half of the Aleutians. That'll translate to a pretty good likelihood of some isolated severe turbulence from the central into the western Aleutians between surface and 3,000 feet. We see an area of turbulence, perhaps moderate turbulence, up along the Alaska Peninsula into Kodiak Island between the surface and 4,000 feet, and a pocket of moderate turbulence possible there, Yukon Flats, between the surface and 4,000 feet. So that does it for your aviation weather. If you do have a flight plan, check the latest conditions and forecast, and have a safe flight.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And once again, you brought some wonderful satellite pictures to show us and do a little show and tell about. It's just amazing. I can get lost in satellite pictures all day. What did you bring today?
Right. Well, weather satellites, what are they good for? Yeah. Of course, there's the pretty pictures that they bring us. You know, we've got a picture here from April of 2012. Okay. The Sumi NPP satellite, it's what they call a polar orbiter, which means it covers Alaska because we're near the pole. Beautiful image. You can see a storm off of southeast Alaska, the sea ice along the Bering Sea up into the Arctic. A really nice picture, and this is important because it allows a forecaster to see where the storms are, where the ice is, where the clear areas are. You need to know where the weather is now if you're going to forecast it into the future. Exactly. So satellites give us these good pictures. This is called surveillance of the weather. And you know, that same satellite also has another picture from a little more recently, August of 2014, Tropical Storm Iselle bearing down on the Hawaiian Islands. Okay. Hawaii doesn't get hit by a whole lot of tropical storms or hurricanes. Sometimes it does. And here's a picture from the same satellite, the Sumi NPP Polar Orbiter. It shows Tropical Storm Iselle approaching the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast. You can see the storm swirling away there, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. This is a tropical storm, not quite as strong as a hurricane because we don't see the eye wall in there. This is still a serious weather system. And all of this information comes just from that satellite picture. It's so much information, and it's wonderful to look at. You see the beauty and the awe of nature right there depicted in that weather satellite. We call it a polar orbiter because the satellite flies high over the globe. Maybe we could look here at we happen to bring the planet Earth with us. This is our satellite. A polar orbit flies really close to the Earth, maybe 800 kilometers over the Earth, and goes up over the pole and then back down, and then the Earth spins under the satellite as it goes by. That's in contrast to the geostationary birds, which are much further out. And they don't view Alaska quite as well. So we love those polar orbiter satellites here in Alaska.
So when we're a lot closer, we get much better details and imagery and an idea of a better maybe position of what's going on when it's passing right over Alaska or right over Hawaii.
Yes, exactly right. The polar orbiter gives such a good view of places like Alaska. And because it's close to the planet, there's another aspect of satellites in the polar orbit that is helpful for weather forecasting. It's an aspect that's maybe not as immediately obvious as the pretty pictures that we see. And that is the capacity for the satellite to produce what's called a sounding. That is finding the vertical profile of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere. We've all heard of weather balloons. Weather balloons are launched here in Alaska twice a day at a number of airports, everywhere from Barrow to St. Paul Island to Kodiak, Anchorage and Fairbanks, Yakutat, a number of places. Launch these balloons, and we've got a picture of a balloon being launched at an airport, and the balloon goes up. It's pulling a little package, an instrument package with it that reports temperature, pressure, humidity data back, and we use that information to help feed what are called numerical weather prediction models.
The models.
The models, right. It's a mouthful, so we just call it the models. And these computer simulations, these models are computer programs that simulate the motion of the atmosphere. Well, how does a model know what the future will be like? You have to tell the model what things are like now. And you give it all kinds of information, including information from these satellite sounders. Very important. Just how important are they? We have a comparatively recent study that really brings home, and this is Superstorm Sandy. We have a track image here of the track of Hurricane Sandy. Was down in the Caribbean around Cuba, and then it moved north over the ocean, offshore of the eastern seaboard, and then at the last minute, Sandy made what's called the left hook. It turned hard to the left and slammed into New Jersey. Was a major problem for the mid-Atlantic states, a calamity. It fused with another weather system and became known, this is not an official title, but Superstorm Sandy. It was quite the weather event. Well, the modelers, after the event, there's a group of modelers in Europe. They have a very good model, a frustratingly good model if you're the Americans trying to pursue their excellence. They reran their model afterwards in what's called a data denial study, where they kept everything the same. So this is 6 months after Sandy, but they went back, they reran the same model, they fed the model the same initial conditions, that is telling the model, okay, here's where we think Sandy is, down near Cuba in the Caribbean. Everything was the same as it was in the real forecast, except they didn't let the model know.
No satellite data.
No satellite data.
Okay.
So we're going to put that over here. No satellite data for you. The resulting forecast 5 days out, back when the real Sandy was happening and the model had the satellite data, the forecast was pretty good. We've got a graphic here on the left side. We show the forecast of where Sandy would be, and that's the red bullseye on the left. It's just south of where it actually wound up hitting. Not a bad forecast from this computer simulation, 120 hours out. On the right, you see the same model, but it didn't have the satellite data to help it understand things. And the storm is way offshore. It misses. The forecast is more accurate when the model has the satellite data. So that's the idea today we want to convey is weather satellites. They're important because they show us the pictures of where storms are. We see good examples of this. Yeah, the surveillance right now, it's great to look at those pictures. And in addition, behind the scenes, maybe not immediately obvious, but the models have to have that satellite data for them to be good forecasts. And then a meteorologist uses that information to help everyone with the forecast of where the storms will be in the future.
That is fascinating information that we can look at, see where things have been, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. That's that old adage there. But seeing that satellites are actually helping us move forward in the weather information system is pretty amazing stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to check out Eric's satellite images that he's been talking about, whether that's something from today or last week or even much further back in Alaska history, you can easily do that yourself. Go to www.gina.alaska.edu and you can find those images there. Eric, thanks so much for joining us once again. And again, we will join you hopefully again soon for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, where you'll tell us more really cool information about the satellites over our heads in Alaska. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and we'll start with the sea ice edge. And once again, we see winds across much of the west coast out of the north and northeast. And as a result, the ice will continue to expand toward the south and west as we go through the midweek. And overall, the ice extent is pretty good there across the central, northern, and varying along the southwest and western coast line. This is some of the most significant ice we've seen in several years, since at least 2012-13. And we've had a mild spell. Some ice may have been lost up through especially Cook Inlet as a result of temperatures in the 40s. And we'll continue to see out across the Panhandle. Well, at least the heavy rains and snows have let up for now. A little bit of clearing will lead to the formation of dense fog overnight, the inner canals. For Tuesday, especially midday and afternoon, winds southeast to south, 15 to 25 knots. Waves generally running around 4 feet. For the outer coast along the Gulf, we are looking at west to southwest winds around 10 to 15 knots and waves 10 to 12 feet. For Thursday, we'll see southeasterly winds across the southern and central inner channels, 15 to 25 knots, waves 3 to 5 feet. Northwesterly, though, down Lynn Canal with 3-foot waves. And then generally southeast winds 30 to 35 knots along the outer coast of the Gulf, with waves running about 10 feet. For south central areas, the northwestern Gulf Coast, we are looking for winds out of the northeast, Prince William Sound, waves a couple of feet. Off the Kenai, east to northeast, 20 to 25 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet. And lower Cook Inlet there, the mouth of Cook Inlet, northerly to 30 knots and waves up around 10 feet. For Thursday, winds will become more northeasterly across much of the area, 20 knots with 4-foot waves at Prince William Sound. At the mouth of Cook Inlet, we are looking at north winds to 35 knots, waves to 14 feet. And off of the Kenai and east-northeast of Kodiak, we expect winds to be northeasterly, 30 knots, waves 9 or 10 feet. On Wednesday, across Kodiak Island, winds will be northeasterly, 30 to as high as 40 knots as we go down on the outer Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, with waves upwards to 13 feet. On the Bering side, north and northeast winds 25 knots, waves 3 feet near Port Huyton to 7 feet north of Cold Bay. For Thursday, winds become more northerly, north or northeasterly, 25 to as high as 35 knots through Shelikof Strait there at Kodiak Island, and generally 35 knot gales offshore of the Alaska Peninsula on the North Pacific side, and north to northeast to 30 knots on the Bering side with waves of 8 feet there north of Cold Bay. The eastern Aleutians, winds will be northeast to east at 30 knots, but increasing to 50 to 55 knot storm force winds west of AKwx, where waves will build upwards of in excess of 20 feet, around 25 to 29 feet. On Thursday, winds across the eastern and central Aleutians will be out of the northeast to east, generally in the 25 to 30 knot range. Waves generally 9 to 15 feet on the North Pacific side and 10 to 15 feet on the Bering side. But nevertheless, as we go up west of AKwx, there will be some waves managing to get in the upper teens to lower 20s. And then across the west coast, winds will be out of the northeast 15 to as high as 25 knots in the vicinity of St. Paul, St. George, where waves will be 7 feet where there is open water. And then on Thursday, look for winds to continue around 20 knots from Norton Sound south of St. Lawrence, but accelerating to 30, even 35 knots there around St. Matthew and down towards St. Paul and St. George, with waves 9 to 13 feet away from the ice where the water is open. The Arctic coast winds will be out of the west, 25 to 30 knots, so they'll begin to come down on Wednesday instead of the strong gust, especially up there toward Kaktovik, and then out toward the lower Chukchi Sea, south to southwest winds 10 to 20 knots. They turn more out of the north there on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, and then westerly winds 20 knots along the Arctic coast, and generally southwest winds there along the northwest coast, turning northerly 10 to 20 knots through the Bering Strait. So that's all the time I have for tonight's show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join me again for the Alaska Weather Show.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.